Hi, this video is about my journey to finding my husband's ancestors. I hope you guys enjoy it. It was recorded on Facebook first, so you're going to hear a difference in volume, but I hope that you enjoy it. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and we'll talk to you later. Study of my husband's family. Now, I have a lot of information. So, my husband's family is very interesting because when I first started researching this out, I went to Londonderry, New Hampshire, and he told me that his family owned a farm in Londonderry. So, I went all the way to Londonderry, New Hampshire. It was only like maybe 15-minute drive from where I lived in Nashua. And I said, okay, yeah, I'm going to go to Londonderry and I'm going to, check all this out. And there was a farmhouse in Londonderry. So, uh, it was an old white colonial and it was on High Range Road. Anyway, to make a long story short, I said, well, I want more information about this house. So I went to the historical society and they had a book that I could purchase. So I purchased the book. And inside it gave me the names of the people that lived in that house, what their likes were, all that kind of thing. Well, what got me more interested is going into the library at Londonderry and said, okay, now I need to find some records because, I had names, but I didn't have anything else. So I wanted to go further back. Now, this is before Ancestry.com became really, really, really popular. And, it was like hard because you had to do your family history basically almost by hand. You had to like, literally go to the town to get the family history. So when I got there, I noticed it said in the book that Joseph Hurd bought the house for his son, Charles. So I said, this is interesting. And they said that Joseph was from Charlestown and that he was a merchant. So then I said, okay, so now I can start digging further back. So I actually did dig further back, but I started out with Joseph instead of further back. So anyway, so I got to the beginning of when it all started. I started reading this record, and it said something on the record from Massachusetts Pioneers. And it said, and this was from the National Library, so I took a copy of it. Hurd, Heard, Hurd, Herd, hard, Hard, hoard, Hord, Hoord, Hhurd. John Taylor, having served with Mr. William Hutchinson for diverse years, May 7th, 1639. Now, what was interesting was that I said, wait a minute, served with William Hutchinson. So I'm like, And then I found out he was married to Anne Hutchinson. And now Hutchinson, excuse me, I can't say this. Hutchinson was the woman that made what do you call it? An uprising in the Puritan church, and they ended up exiled in 1638 from Boston. I believe it was in the Anatonian controversy, something like that. So I found this quite interesting, and I'm like, diverse years. So, I looked up in the history books and stuff like that about being an indentured servant. And indentured servants would agree to work as a servant or an apprentice or something underneath someone wealthier so they could pay their fare to go to the New World. And he came in on the ship with William and Anne Hutchinson. And what was interesting was that he was a tailor and William Hutchinson was a merchant. And he was a merchant in clothing. cloth, they said. Um, so what happened was, I guess, um, this is what it says here in the Jacob Hurd and His Sons book, which I will cover that another day. All right. I said John Hord. Now he liked to be called Hord, Hord. Though for some reason he used Hord as his last name. So I'm not sure exactly how it was spelled in England, but I have a hunch. I might have a hunch in a little bit. I'll discuss that with everybody. But the immigrant um came in on what they call the ship called the Griffin in 1634, and he served for diverse years um, afterwards in the town. And it said that William Hutchinson was a clothing merchant, but he was also a leader in Boston for a little while, kind of like a magistrate or even a governor. And when they got exiled out of the town in 1638, I guess they gave John his freedom because there is a record saying that he married Mary in, well, before 1639 in New England, and Mary had no last name. So that was quite interesting to see that record on Ancestry.com. Most of the stuff I can find on Ancestry.com. What I found out from about Mary, his wife, was that she was a nurse, and I found out that Anne Hutchinson was a midwife. So the possibility that John might have met Mary under the same household as indentured servants. So in order for him to afford fare to come to Boston, to start a new life, to run a business, he had to move to the New World. Now, he said he was a tailor in trade, so the possibility that he is not what's called uneducated. Now, they said a lot of indentured servants weren't educated, but I think he was educated to run his own business. I mean, he had to learn how to run all the, the paperworks and everything to run your own business. Um, Now, according to Dina Hurd, who wrote like the Book of Herds or the Ancestry Heraldry of the Hurd family, she covered uh, John Hord as well in the book because the name was changed. So I want to tell you how the name changed from Hord to Hurd. So, in the records that I have found, that there were many different variants of the name Hurd, and it was pronounced a certain way. So, Hood would be like similar, and that could be spelled Hurd, Hord, Horde. I've seen it Hurde in the records in England. So there was a lot about the family in here. So the reason why I said he spelt it Hord. Now Dina Hansen, I'm gonna look her up here, said the name Horde is an Anglo-Saxon, which means hoard, Hoard, which is like you hoard stuff or whatever. And then the French Howard and the Scotch Irish Hord, Hord, meaning steward or caretaker, from which comes the insignia, a crest with a raven and a gob of wheat hoarding it. And the crest that was given to Jacob Hurd, which I'll cover another day, was like had a raven with a hoarding wheat on top of it, and it was a horde crest versus a herd crest, which was a different crest. It looks different. And it was quite interesting. The research that she did on this ancestor was she said that he came from, and what did she say? he came from Oxford area or Salop or Surrey or all those different areas. She said Oxford. But when I read this one, which is the pedigree of the family of Hurd of Salop, Oxon, which is Oxford, and Surrey, they said they found a family in Somerset that spelled their last name Hourde from Kingston. Kingston. And of course, the line, which was interesting because there was a John Hurde born the year that his ancestor was born. I guess there was one record I found that they said he was a certain age when he died in 1690. So I kind of did the math and said, okay, he was born in 1612. So there was only about 8 John Hurds, all different spelling variations born at that time period. But there was another John Hurd, Hourde, which they spelled Hurd in Elliston, which was born in 1612. He died at birth, and another one was born in 1613 or 14. And that one wasn't the ancestor. So I thought it was that one because of the line that said that they used the similar spelling and was part of the family but had no arms. So the Hordes had an arms, which was kind of interesting. I don't know. I'm kind of stumped because I still cannot find where this ancestor is, and I think it's because um there's so many different ones, so many different variations, and I have no clues other than the children's birth baptismal records in Boston. They spell the last name Hurde. So I was thinking, hmm. So I think that's why I used that ancestor because I spelled his last name Hurde. Anyway, now that I'm done boring you guys about family history, it is somewhat interesting. The indentured servanthood was quite interesting, especially with Anne Hutchinson and her husband William Hutchinson being involved in that and being an indentured servant of them. And I found out the indentured servant works about 4 to 6 years depending on their contract. Boy, would I have loved to have seen that contract. If they actually have it, it would be somewhere in England, probably, in the annals of the history, just to see where he came from and all this story behind it in England. I'd love to know that. But a lot of them who come into the United States, they change their names for reasons we don't know. Maybe they figured new start, new name. But he always referred to himself as Hord, Hord. And a lot of people get that confused because there were other John Hurds that settled in Massachusetts, in Maine, in New Hampshire, in Connecticut, or Hords, or Hewards, or Howards. They all came in around that time period. So it's very hard sometimes because people on Ancestry use, okay, well, this ancestor that I'm looking for in Connecticut was, from Somerset and, um, died in 1690 in Boston. But does that make sense? Like, when people do their own, genealogies and they say, okay, yep, my original ancestor's name was John Hurd. And they look and they say, oh, he settled in Connecticut. Well, you can't use Boston, Massachusetts records for Connecticut records because they're different areas. So the John Hurd in Connecticut was from a different family, or maybe even cousins. I'm saying like distant cousins. And it's interesting that they probably were one family at one time and then they spurred off, or they were separate families with separate last names, but their names ended up somehow changed. And a lot of times they said the discrepancy in the changing of the name is because some people don't go further than sixth grade in school. So they only had grade school level of spelling. So they went by how it sounded, and then they chose how they wanted to spell it. So like I said, that initial ancestor who I think he's from in like 1400 spelt his last name Hourde. Well, then I can see why they took the O out and just used Hurde. And then when he died, he called himself Hurd the whole time and wrote Hord, but his wife used Hurd. And we do not know why. Maybe because she saw the church records and they were spelled Hurde, so she dropped the E. We don't know. But I have one record I found about the pronunciation of the name, and if it's Hurde and Horde sounded exactly the same. And it was a college record from Oxford, and it was George Horde, and they would spell it Horde, and then in parentheses they wrote Hurde. Talking about confusing. Anyway, so the next time I come on, maybe I'll share a little bit more about this ancestor because his story is quite interesting. If you are interested in any other videos, you can check out my Boston trip reels that are on the channel. And you guys have a great day, and God bless you all.